All right, let's start out. We're going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, if you don't mind. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the meeting to order for a special work session with the Charter Review Committee recommendations for March 31st, 2022. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, Mr. President.
And they are okay okay. Some of what we're doing tonight, of course, is going to be reviewing sections 4 and 5. Part of that is topics that were submitted to the Charter Review Committee by the County Council. And if you could state your names for the public, thank you.
Sure. So I'm Mike Dunn. I have the pleasure of being the chair of the 15-member Charter Review Committee.
Paul Wilbur, County Attorney.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. So the first portion of the section is section 408, 409, and 414. Any questions, I will bring that out to council members. This is something whereas 414 is listed in and it is addressed by the committee. 408 and 409 were not. So would any of the council members want to review what the concerns were on the council in reference to the particular sections of 408, 409?
Mr. President, if I might, I just want to refresh for the members of the council that as with everything, what we did, we had your list that you had been compiling over the course of some time, and so we went through the list of recommendations that the council wanted us to look at, as well as just going through the charter, if you will, on our own. So we went through, in fact, we went through the list that the council had twice to make sure that we had covered all of the no, again, we didn't act on all of them, but we certainly addressed all of them. So
Okay.
do the best I can to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Section 408, to refresh memories, that's a reference of the removal of the county executive from office. I believe part of that is based on whether the executive is unable by reason of physical or mental disability to perform duties. I think some of the questions that arose was whether a cognitive assessment test should be required with majority of the council vote, because as the charter left it, it really didn't state, to my understanding, of by whose claim might there be. And there was a concern that how do you initiate that process, and how do you even make that that conclusion, come to that conclusion, if it isn't some type of formal process put into place. So I believe that is why the council was looking to have some type of language in there as to whether or not there should be a cognitive assessment test. Mr. Wilbur, I would defer to you.
I see your point there about it's how do you initiate the process?
Mm-hmm.
That's your question, and that's.
I think you initiate the process by an affirmative vote of at least 5 members.
You mean requesting a cognitive assessment test?
Well, or just not requesting a cognitive assessment test, because I'm not sure just technically what that may look like or what form that might take, but just the fact that if 5 council members are concerned enough that they vote to start the process of trying to remove the county executive due to mental disability or or a physical disability, they can't do their job. That starts that process.
I think what President Cannon is asking is what initiates that cognitive test, that physical or mental disability test
5
before
votes,
the
5 votes by the county, 5 votes of council members.
Wouldn't that require, and I don't know how you put this in the charter, but some kind of qualifier by some medical doctor of some sort? Or, I mean, we can all sit up here and say, hey, it needs to go, but if there's not some kind of, or whatever, some kind of documentation from some higher power, I guess is the word I want to use.
And Mr. Holloway, we didn't, as a charter review committee, we kind of didn't go that deep into it. As we all know, former executive Culver, this came as close to probably being a thing as we might get when Mr. Culver was ill and everything. But we simply thought, much like what Paul is saying and Mr. McCain is saying, that the first move, if you will, would come from you all based on, this is where the Charter Review Committee was. The evidence would be so evident, no pun intended, that you all would have to make that determination. And then if the county executive did not believe that he or she was impaired enough physically or mentally, then there's the appeal process to the circuit court system.
Yes, as the charter is now, it requires 5 votes.
Right.
And it also says, after a public hearing and upon a finding that the county executive is unable by reason of physical or mental disability to perform the duties of office for a continuous period of 6 months.
An awkward public hearing, to say the least.
Yeah, no
Do we-
doubt.
Do we just strike the public hearing?
That's,
Or, I'm trying to think why that is there, because that's kind of putting the cart before the horse, but go ahead, Mr.
Yeah, and I think about HIPAA regulation.
Yeah, that's not bad.
And how is an executive, she may not be willing to give up any medical records.
Right.
Then you get into,
Yeah.
is the council going to ask for an independent medical exam of an executive? I mean, that's not stated in here. I think that's President Cannon's starting point. Is how do you start this whole process?
Then the other thing is, do you kick them when they're down?
that, and that's,
The human side of it. We all knew the former county executive had medical issues and probably wasn't capable. But if the government is functioning through, the county administrator, do you step up? I mean, it's a tough one.
It's a tough
one.
That's the decision we make,
And
as a council, our decision might be not to,
I think to keep one thing in mind is that it's already in the charter. And our goal in reviewing this today is to try to make sure that, as Bill said, a public hearing. I mean, you really want a public hearing. So I think there should be measures that we could maybe fine tune 408 to make it an easier process for both branches of government. We can't be reinventing the wheel. You heard when Trump was in office, the House of Delegates, the House of
Representatives.
The House of Representatives, thank you. They wanted to sort of go through that formal process. They're talking about that formal process with the current president. That's right. So there are places in the federal government to address it, and I guess it's probably votes has to be taken by Congress as a body to get there. I don't know if there are any other counties in the state of Maryland, executive legislative forms of government, that might help us find something that is not quite as harsh as how this is right here, and could be more expedient.
and to Mr. Holloway's point, I thought you all did a very commendable job knowing, the circumstances of Mr. Culver, and the government was functioning well, and you had good people in place, and you kind of just let things ride out. And, one would think this is a fairly rare occurrence, and to impose Section 408, and I'd say this council probably came as close under the circumstances with, again, the late Mr. Culver.
Right.
And you just sort of decided to let it ride, if you will. So
We did.
And I applaud, again, I think the citizens certainly applauded that, and you all showed,
And to Mr. Cannon's point, I think a public hearing is imperative. Otherwise, we would be hanged.
No, not imperative, you mean excessive.
Well, if we decide to move forward, I think the public should be involved with a hearing. Let them know what's going on.
That's not what John was saying. He was saying
Yeah.
we don't need one.
You don't think we do need one?
Yeah, I kind of thought that was getting a little bit too, making things a little bit too public.
You know what?
I'd rather,
I'd say we leave it like it is, only reason I said, as you can see, we're going kind of sideways with it, it's not like there's an obvious,
And I'm okay leaving it the way it is.
there's not some kind of obvious fix here or obvious way to improve it or.
And God willing, we're not going to go through that again.
No, yeah. And to your point, collectively, that's sort of where we were. We thought it was written fairly well, and nobody kind of wanted to go down that road because it would be, again, pretty rare occasion. But anyway.
Would it be worthwhile to see whether there are any executive legislative forms of government that do have something that
Can we check with Mako?
suits?
I can research that.
Okay, let's see where that might head. Because even though we recognize, well, it may not ever, I think it's our responsibility to make sure we,
I would be curious to see what other counties do.
okay, all right. All right, that's how we'll move forward there with the Section 408. Section 409, as it is right now, forfeiture of office. The county executive shall immediately forfeit the office if he ceases to be a qualified voter of the county or is convicted of a felony or a crime involving moral turpitude. You guys addressed this, didn't you, with the moral turpitude?
Did
Yes.
in a different section of the charter. We added felony, I believe, moral turpitude earlier in the charter as one of our recommendations.
So, Mr. Wilbur, will we just simply, if you can make a note that that's where that same language would maybe need to go into 409?
It's already in 409.
It's in 409. It wasn't in that other part.
Wasn't in. Correct.
Okay,
It
yeah,
is
you're right, it
409.
does say a felony.
Yeah.
It was
Okay.
council, I believe it was council members in the previous thing.
So,
409 is good.
so our
It is-
question, go ahead.
It just say a felony or a crime of moral, to be clear. So if it's not quite a felony level and it's still moral turpitude, so like, let's say the current situation or the situation that was happening in Cambridge with a gentleman there, I don't know if that's felony level, don't leave me on, but that type of behavior, if you all know what I'm talking about, that would certainly qualify in the moral. So does that force then the moral turpitude? It'd almost be, it'd be better if it just read a felony with moral.
But the individual you referenced, he's been charged, he hasn't been convicted.
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line?
Well, then leaving the convicted part in there.
Have to have a conviction.
Correct.
Right.
And I think he resigned.
He
also,
resigned.
didn't
He had enough pressure, he resigned.
That's right.
Yes, go ahead.
To Josh's point, the way I read this, it would be a felony, that'd be any felony, or
Right.
a crime involving moral turpitude, so that could be a misdemeanor involving moral turpitude. So
I think that's very vague, though.
Do you think we should define moral turpitude? I don't think a lot of people understand what that means.
With examples.
Well,
it's
I think-
defined in cases.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, I think-
many judges have spoken to the issue of, is this a crime of moral
I
turpitude?
mean, we know what moral turpitude is, but the public doesn't.
It would have been defined because they would have been convicted. So in the proceeding court process, it would be, it would be defined. We don't need to define it because, we're only doing it if they've been convicted of it. So,
I would say let the case law speak as to if someone is convicted of a certain misdemeanor, is it a crime of moral turpitude?
So now-
Judges have addressed that.
Okay, sounds,
Yeah.
Joe,
turpitude, yeah.
Turpitude.
Yeah.
Joe, make sure you use the mic.
Is moral turpitude always a crime?
Could use your mic.
if the answer to that's yes. If you're, in this situation, the answer would be yes, because you've been convicted of it. You're only
Yeah.
convicted
All right.
of crimes.
All right,
really.
okay.
Right.
Now,
So
the,
you could do something that might be bad, but if you're not
Right.
convicted,
Yeah,
you're
okay.
you're still,
If you're not charged and convicted, then
right,
Okay.
you're okay.
it
Right.
doesn't go anywhere.
but now the council's question to the Charter Review Committee was, should this section be expanded to include violations of the charter? Because that's where the council found itself so tied up in knots. We knew we had outright violations of the charter, and it was absolutely impossible for us to follow through and to actually come to any resolution.
And in our narrative, we addressed that, and this question came up a lot. And again, we had Mr. Bob Benson was the vice chair, who's an attorney. Paul was there at every step of the way. And based on the research, it just is such a difficult thing to it's a road that is very difficult to go down, to remove in that way. I might again yield to the lawyer at the table, because we did spend a considerable amount of time and concluded it was just too problematic to.
I think part of the discussion was who is the entity that determines that the charter's been violated? Would that be a judge? There was discussion about creating a three-judge panel
Yeah.
to address that point
Right.
if it came up. That it would be difficult to say if, say, the council said, we believe the charter's been violated, the executive said, no, I didn't violate it. Somebody has to call it. And
Well, and
We
that's,
couldn't find a referee, if you will, or that we were not able to establish in any other counties who is, again, my word, who's the referee in a situation like this.
well, very correct, but we did have two attorneys that
That's right.
truly took the position, not with your group, but two attorneys that took the position at the time that there were indeed charter violations that occurred. It wasn't any personnel issues between the executive and legislative branch. It was without question, two attorneys affirmed without question that the charter was violated, and we could get no recourse. We did, everything was done to try to not, the last thing you want to do is air your laundry in public, and you don't want to do that. We were trying to take some measures to address this behind the scenes, which resulted in at least a year delay and not really getting any assistance in the direction we were trying to head. We did not want to go into, the circuit court and have Wicomico County's executive and legislative branches sue each other in court. So the reason this question was asked is because we felt there was unquestionably an issue that had to be addressed and resolved, had no course to follow, and that's why we were looking for some type of guidance.
We, as a charter review committee, collectively agreed that there had been charter violations. We say that in our narrative. But again, in trying to find an avenue for a body like the county council now or in the future to pursue, we know this is a violation of the charter. What can we do? We just didn't find
John, I
any.
believe there was 3 attorneys. Yeah.
Three attorneys, yeah.
Again, nobody's questioning that. We were in agreement to that. But to add, again, it proved to be virtually, I'll look to Laura too, it proved to be virtually impossible to find the avenue for a council to pursue these violations in a court or anything else. We talked out loud, I'll say what we talked out loud about is that as unfortunate as it was, perhaps erring and saying publicly, we believe as a council, whether that's a letter, whether that's just a comment to the public at large, that there are violations going on here. Not sure if we heard a lot of that respectfully, because you were again trying to walk that fine line between going into court and county council suing the county executive. That's a bad headline no matter where it's written.
So we're stuck with the problem of, if we have a county executive basically saying, and believe me, I don't have the answer to the problem, but we're basically stuck with the problem of a county executive being able to do whatever he wants to do with no recourse. And that's a problem.
That's what we want.
I would,
We could have gone to a judge.
yeah, it
Could have gone
ultimately,
to court and had a judge decide.
Well, like I
Because
said,
there's probably things right now that aren't being followed in the charter. I'm not saying there is, but there may be things now.
like,
So, I mean,
Do we go to court every time the charter's violated? I mean, that's,
how far you want to take it?
excuse me?
How far you want to take it? I think it's 5
Yeah.
months, right?
Well, that's why we're looking for protections in the charter.
like I said, that's what we were just saying, is that we were avoiding that. We were trying the best we could to avoid going to a judge because we didn't want that to happen in the headlines saying, the legislative branch is suing the executive branch. That was our last resort.
I understand, but I mean, I think at some point you just have to say, we need to do it. We need to make a decision and take it to
To
court.
Mrs. Ackley's point, that's sort of where, and I'll just, if you don't mind, I'll read two of the bullet points that were in our narrative that we were asking you to consider outside of making a charter change. We recommend that the Wicomico County Council consider making its code of conduct stronger, evaluating the addition of punitive actions such as censures to deal with conflicts of interest, ethics violations, charter violations that may occur. Our next bullet point said, recommend any charter violation which occurs to be discussed publicly. The CRC, Charter Review Committee, strongly believes that when and if violations or alleged violations of the county charter occur by either branch of government, that they be given the full light of day. So it does require a little bit of, I think where Mrs. Ackley is kind of saying, if we feel strongly enough about it, then it, ugly as it is, that's, you have to, it's incumbent upon the council to talk about it publicly, to put it out here, because otherwise, you know, there's nothing, if you will, to talk about.
Could we, I know we have different situations where we vote 4-3. You got the one we just talked about by 5 votes. Could we do a 7 vote?
That is a super majority.
Super
Yeah.
majority.
Well, you know, if you're talking, I mean, that's a big move to get rid of a county executive.
Yeah.
I mean, that's very extreme. I mean, that's really extreme. But, you know, should we have an extreme situation
Yeah.
where 7 council members, it's very obvious that,
Unanimous.
you know, that he's done, that they, I won't keep saying he, they've done something that,
To your point, Mr. Holloway, you know, we had a couple of impeachments in the last 20 years, and they fail to convict often because there's not that broad sense of buy-in. So just have a message that was 7-0 in a vote, I think is probably a heck of a lot stronger than, if you will, 4-3 or 5-2. But again,
But I don't think that should be in the charter. You have to have
Sure.
7, not, because then one person could just discombobulate a whole.
Somebody can just not show up.
Yeah, right, yeah, I mean, that's just,
well, if it didn't,
that's almost impossible.
if they voted no, it wouldn't
You
go.
know, that's why you have a super majority, that's hard enough.
As a legal matter, I think there may be an issue with the council removing the executive as opposed to the voters at an election
Yeah.
removing the executive. I do think the council could vote to censure the executive. Now, that's a.
What does
just
that
a
accomplish?
Public wrist slap, you might say. It's not a,
Right, what does that accomplish?
yeah, it's just a public
Don't do it again.
reprimand. That's what it is.
What's the difference between that and a vote of no confidence?
They would be very similar. You know, both are saying the executive is not doing the job.
And I think the public would look at that as just foolishness. So, well, you censured him, what have you done? Nothing. I
Right.
think the public would look at it for really what it is. And the reason we brought this up is because the violation of the charter, as we understand it, Mr. Wilbur, the charter is law, is it not?
Yeah,
It's no, breaking the charter is no
It's the
different.
Constitution of the
Of
county.
the county.
So it's no different than running a stop sign, or it's no different than, you know, assault and battery, is that right?
It's essentially the core framework of the county, governmental framework, and then
Foundation.
you adopt all your
Right.
code, all your laws underneath that.
So what would be the process if you know that there's been a direct violation of the Constitution? What recourse does this government body have?
Well,
Can I take a stab at that?
No, not yet.
at the federal level,
No, oh, go ahead.
at the federal level, it's impeachment, which we have recently seen examples of.
Twice.
Which is our
But
408.
but you don't really have an impeachment power.
Well, but the closest thing we have to it, that's what I'm going to say, is if you back up to 408, because we're in 409 talking about this, but this is really a 408 issue, is removal of the county executive from office. You know, what if you added in there where, you know, the only way you're removing the county executive from office is due to physical or mental disabilities?
Right.
What if you had where that sentence says, you know, physical or mental disability to perform the duties for a continuous period of 6 months, or due to a series of cumulative violations of the county charter?
As determined by who, though? Because there's always,
Well, we
Different
don't say who, we don't say as determined by who, we just, I mean, you have to prove there's been a series of cumulative violations of the charter.
So how many is a series? Where do you get?
Joe, please use your microphone.
Where do you get to that point?
You gotta remember, this is a macro document.
I understand.
So, yeah, you can't micro address every what if. There's always gonna be unlimited what ifs, but from a macro level,
Your wrist slapped.
yeah, you just gotta find a general.
So, well, one question I have before we go too much further, and goes back to what Mr. Dunn said about the Charter Review Committee, how do we put that in writing, those recommendations?
Well, what we asked you all to do, again, because we knew we were handing you 24 recommendations, we handed you, as part of our narrative, some bullet points for you to talk about, in the future. And,
What you just said, I agree with that, so how do we put that in the charter?
yeah. Well, and I, Mr. President, that, a censure, we acknowledge that it's powerless, if you will. But I think there's something to be said, and we talked about this in the Charter Review Committee. There was an Ocean City Council person recently censured, I believe, I don't recall who or what. There was the public disgrace, for lack of a way of saying it, that the Cambridge mayor just reacted to. I think if the public, and we discussed this, if the public were to read that the council censured one of its members, or the public were to read that the council censured a county executive based on this, and this series of charter violations, I think that's better than doing nothing, which at the end of the day, last time, again, for various reasons, your hands were tied. And I do, what Mrs. Ackley is saying relative to, there may just come a point in time where you got to do what you got to do. County executive may react in a different way, and this ends up in a court. And
And many times, what the public's going to say is that there's a dysfunctional county government or dysfunctional council.
well, and
So
if
we have to
the-
be careful what we do.
If the violations that we heard about and we discussed were laid out there for the public in full view, again, politics is nothing but public opinion, right? And there was some pretty overwhelming evidence that there were some charter violations going on. And I think the public would have reacted had the council risen to a level of censure if it had the vehicle called a censure in its code of conduct.
Well, I think Mr. McCain hit on a very good point, and that being the fact that possibly putting this verbiage into 408, adding it into 408, because again, we can't overlook the fact that it is breaking the law. I feel strongly about that. It is breaking the law. And as Joe said, you can't just have an executive that just can do, wants to do or can do anything he wants. And even with a censure or a vote of no confidence, the county executive can continue to do what they're attempting to do. And as was acknowledged in your meetings, the county as a whole came to a standstill for quite some time, and we did not even go to the bond market. That's how serious the situation was. So you have to remember that.
You gotta press this.
That we were at a complete standstill.
To be clear, we were in favor of trying to do something on a punitive way. We just couldn't land on something, and now it's
Mr.
in your
Wilbur,
hands.
with Mr. McCain's idea of possibly transferring that terminology into 408, what's your opinion on that?
I'm hesitant. I mean, the physical and mental disability, yes, it's
Understood.
there.
Right.
But because you've got the council making a decision, even though it's an accumulated number of violations, to remove an executive that the voters have put in place. Legally, I think there may be an issue with that.
But there's also terminology in here for appeals process, that the executive can go through an appeals process.
Yeah, there is.
So it's not a do-all, end-all. It is the way that you can initiate the process.
And maybe there's another word too, maybe cumulative is not, I'm just trying to head in a direction. It's got to be something very serious. It's not just because there's an argument they violated this one thing in the charter. No, that's not.
They didn't just run a stop sign, if
There's
you
got to
will.
be some kind of a pattern, series of cumulative actions. I mean, there could be other.
And I like that.
synonyms.
If you add that, especially to what, actually, I like what Joe was saying with the 7-0 vote, and if you add in the censure part. If we have said that there was a violation of the charter, we as a council could censure the county executive for that particular action. That is basically like, that's a demerit mark, right? It's we have said that this is unacceptable. If we have said that this is unacceptable, we've censored for that violation of the charter multiple times, and the violations continue. Then at some point in time, if we were to set up a really high bar of, say, a 7-0 vote, I feel like and there's still an appeals process, I feel like we've put as much teeth into this as we probably could.
So, just so you know, 408 does say the decision of the county council to remove the county executive may be appealed by the executive by petition to the circuit court for Wicomico County within 10 days following the council's vote to remove. Upon the filing of a petition, the court may stay the removal pending its decision. The court shall make independent determinations and facts. So it does give processes for it to go to the courts if the executive wants to challenge it. I think the question is the first line where it talks about the public hearing and all that, that we would want to sort of maybe tweak that just a bit.
If you go that way, if you want to put something in, I'm thinking, do you want to go with a censure process and then if not corrected, if the violation's not corrected, then go to the removal process? It's like, we're going to give you one chance to.
That's a good, I mean, that's a good point. We could.
I'm okay.
Yeah, we could, all right, then we're talking more about 408 now than we are 409. So after the first sentence where it's talking about mental disability, we could begin a second sentence, as Councilman McCain suggested, talking about the violation. I don't know if a number of violations is necessary. One violation is a violation. And one violation, you're breaking the law, If you shoot somebody, it's...
Is that one violation the censure, and then the next one is court?
Mr. Wilbur, can you sort of formalize what you think would be the best legal approach to that?
The other term might be willful violation of the charter. It
Because
might
people can violate the charter without really,
Not knowing it.
very seldom does somebody have the charter out saying,
That's
"I'm gonna do this.
That's right.
Yeah,
You could have grade 1 violation or a grade 10.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
All right, that would be great, Mr. Wilbur, if you could.
I'll work on that.
Okay. Anything else, Michael, on that?
You're witnessing and exercising exactly what we did, which is, this is it's a deep rabbit hole, this one. So this is, what you're doing is kind of what we did.
Okay.
Heard what we went through.
Absolutely.
I'm doing the math.
Yeah.
30 minutes, number one.
Yeah, right,
8
right.
more to go?
It'll go faster.
4.5 hours.
I guess the number, we've settled 4089. 414 is just to add a letter D to state. To add letter D to state the county executive must notify the county council within 10 working days of a vacancy of a department head. I think, in reading this, it seemed to me as if,
What number are you on there?
well,
John
it's
Boyd?
414.
414.
We recommended that, the Charter Review recommended that
409.
add a letter D to state that the county executive must notify the county council in writing within 10 working days of a vacancy of a department head, because we were led to believe that you all sometimes were left in the blind when a department head was no longer there, and you would learn about it at the same time.
Might be
as
an
the
accurate
public.
assessment.
Yeah, that's.
Well, I think what was also another issue from our question that we sent out, that's a valid point, number one. But I think another issue that was really struck home even more was that the extension of the 90 calendar days, that the council was never notified of the appointment of an acting director.
Yeah.
So we never knew when the 90 days started. So we were trying to get something in the charter that said that upon the appointment of an acting director, the council must be notified in writing so that we would know when the 90 days started. And I think the second part of that is that the acting status cannot go on in perpetuity. that's what we were faced with as well, a 90-day, a 90-day, a 90-day, a 90-day, forever and ever. So I think somewhere in this section, the council was looking for two things, or maybe three. One was to be notified when there was a vacancy. The second thing was to be notified when an acting department head was appointed, and this would be a department head or an administrator or assistant administrator. And the third part was the limitation, if any, of this reappointment of the same individual for 2 or 3 consecutive acting terms.
We did have discussion about this. At the end of the day, we didn't make a recommendation because, again, if you'll recall, there were people problems and there were charter problems. And if a better line of communication existed and/or into the future exists, hopefully this isn't a problem in these, quote, and there were sort of games. We'll appoint this person for 90 days, we'll reappoint them at the 89th day for another 90 days. That, if you have good lines of communication between the executive and the council, then maybe this was kind of landed on a people problem for us, if I recall.
John, what would you recommend? I'd recommend no more than 290 days, 180.
290 days. And
Yeah, 180 is fine.
yes, and the after 290 days, it must be approved by the county council, period. You just can't go on forever and ever. And
Or that person then ceases to be the director or
Yes,
interim?
right.
I
Yeah,
think
that
you've
would-
got to
that would-
throw that, if you're going to go down that road.
So they're out of the position, then they'd have to put
That's-
another person in there until they found a full-time.
because,
I think-
trust me, you will have another county executive that will want someone to work for them. The council may object, and this 90 days will go on for 4 years.
So what do we do if they just contractually hire somebody like what's going on now?
Can they?
Well, that's, I don't know about, well, we also, depending on the contract, right, Ms. Hurley, there's some restrictions to that, right?
I mean, I think it's a position that's in our pay and classification plan that was meant to be filled, not contracted out.
What happens if they don't? I mean, where do we stand? I mean,
Violation of the charter.
Well, we could add in there that it has to be, after the second 90-day period, any further appointments any other further appointments or contractual obligations have to be approved by the council.
I think that's a good idea.
Mr. Wilbur, did you?
So, are you saying that someone can only be that one person can only be acting for a total of 180? Is that what I'm hearing?
After that point in time, the county council must approve any continuations, because I don't believe we have to approve the continuation of the 90 days, is that
The
correct?
way it's written right now, may not exceed 90 calendar days except by council approval.
So how was it managed to be a continuous 90 days forever and ever?
This appointment may be extended by the council every 90 calendar days.
So how was it that the 90 days and the 90 days continued without council approval?
of the charter.
I think that there was a charter amendment done in 2016, so I think that's, prior to that is when you're thinking of the continuous, when John Redden was the acting director for.
That went on for years.
Right,
Yes.
but I believe we had, didn't we have the issue with acting more recently?
I think you're
I think
right.
the issue we have right now with acting is that, for example, Public Works, we don't have an acting director. And so I think the question that I see on the list submitted was, is there a time frame in which that appointment as acting should be done? Are you following me? I mean, right now, we don't have an acting, we just have our deputy director doing the role of a director.
I think you don't want to put anyone in a box either. You really don't. You would like the position to be filled, but unfortunately, in some instances, we've seen where it's almost, impossible to fill those positions. All right, but then I have to backtrack then, and I apologize, because I was under the impression that there was a process where 90 days, and you might be right, Joe, it could have just been a charter violation, where the 90 days was extended and extended and extended on more than one occasion. So that,
Well, I think the term was changed on occasion too, from acting to even to kind of keep extending some of these positions.
yeah, but
We agreed that this was a mess. I don't know how else to put it, that some of the things that had occurred over that course of, 5 years put everybody in just an awkward and tough position. We didn't come up with any answers, but we at least did acknowledge that it was just not handled well.
Mr. Wilbur, I guess we would need some, maybe stronger language on notification within 10 days.
That's, I've made that note in
Okay.
the acting section.
Okay.
The same type of language will be down in D about written notification
Always does that.
within 10 days, 10 working days.
For the vacancy or for the appointment?
That,
Both, right,
for an acting appointment.
okay, all right,
So you know, and that starts the clock running on the 90.
Okay.
Then there has to be council approval to go another 90.
okay. All right, good. So that takes us to section 507 and 508. Both of these were questions that were proposed by the council. Section 7 was referencing the Department of Law. Should there be an in-house legal department? This is more than just a charter amendment. This is total change in philosophy of how we want to address. And I don't know if the council wants to, we'd have to see whether the council even had an appetite for saying we no longer want contractual legal expenses. We want to bring the law department back in as a department head. I'm not ready to go there anymore right now. I mean, honestly, I've always felt that when we did the math before that happened, that in-house surprisingly was less expensive, even with benefits, than to contract out. But I'm not ready to go in that direction and reevaluate that. I don't know.
Next council deal with it.
I don't know about anyone else.
It's an official punt, correct? That was a punt.
So, I mean, unless, because this is the council that helped to create these questions, so what's,
If you get into hiring an attorney, an in-house law firm, of course, you've got employees that go along with that. And as I think we saw before, at some point in time, we still had to hire outside legal advice, right? At different times. A firm such as, I'll use Paul's as an example, has different people that specialize in different things that, broader, I guess maybe a broader base of knowledge. Is that a good way to put it? Is that I'm pushing my button. I'm not supposed to push it now. A broader base of knowledge. I'd rather see us stay with just contractual.
anybody else?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I'm fine staying.
Okay, the second issue in 507 was, part of 507 indicates that all contracts involving the interest of the county are to be submitted to the county attorney and shall be approved by the county attorney in writing as to their legal sufficiency. Should this section apply to the legislative branch of government if they have their own independent legal counsel that can review contracts?
I think it's good to have both of them look them over.
I personally would like to,
Huh? Yeah, that's what we're doing now.
for consistency, I think we should stay with the county attorney and as a final approval. People need to know where to look. Too. Okay,
So would that be a charter amendment?
no, we would sort of
We're
leave
just
it as
saying-
is. We leave it as is.
already covers that.
Yes,
Yeah, right.
yes. Okay, so that's, that would be 507, section.
Can I just
Yes.
point one thing out? Just as a reminder, there was a situation under the former county executive where we did not want Mr. Wilbur to review one of our contracts due to issues that were happening with the executive branch. So I just want to remind you guys of that situation.
Very hesitant to weigh in on this, but we did discuss this at length. And I will just simply say that the Charter Review Committee fully acknowledged the desire of the county council to have its own council attorney. We also, though, fully acknowledged and thought that at the end of the day, there can be only one legal opinion to stand for the county, and likely that being the county attorney. So much like a whole bunch of the other things we're talking about tonight, this just puts us in a weird light, what Mrs. Hurley just talked about. There's no right answer to that, but we just felt that having differing opinions, while it didn't happen often, but to hear the council attorney say X and the county attorney say Y, and if you're watching at home or hearing, it just leads to some confusion among residents. So that's all I'll say about that.
We've actually had our attorneys agreeing here lately, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely, which is always a good thing. And that happened more often than not. But yeah, it's just a little awkward when council attorney says one thing and the official formal county attorney says something different.
What that usually results in is both of them going back and doing further research, right? I mean, if you've got differing opinions, they just go back and look at it again.
One convinced the other.
Yeah.
Mr. Wilbur, Mr. Wilbur, you've never been in a courtroom where two lawyers didn't have different opinions.
Lawyers always have different opinions.
Yes, it has to, you have to. Thank you, Ms. Hurley. The Section 508 Citizen Advisory Boards, I think this is a very valid point that the council's asking, and I think we should consider it strongly. This section indicates that the county executive may appoint one or more temporary advisory boards of citizens to assist in consideration of county administrative policies and programs. Certain members of the council would like to be given the option to appoint an advisory board as well to help assist with certain matters such as animal ordinance committees, et cetera, to rewrite laws. So it would just simply be adding something to the charter to allow the council that same privilege.
Do we not already have that authority, or does it need to be, does this section need to be, does that need to be spelled out?
Yes.
I kind of feel like we already have that authority. Mr. Wilbur, do we? I mean, because we automatically appoint other groups as needed, right?
What says we can't?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a specific grant to use this process.
Like, I think about broadband, it'd be very nice to have a citizens advisory commission on broadband.
That's my
We
point.
can establish it
What
now.
says we can't?
Yeah.
Right now?
There is
Why
a
can't
charter
we?
provision that says you cannot do that. I'm looking for it.
As the charter is written right now, it says the county executive may appoint for designated periods one or more temporary advisory boards of citizens of the county who shall, without compensation, assist in consideration of county administrative policies and programs provided or appointed by the county executive under the president's section shall be subject to the confirmation procedure set forth in 315. So, Mrs. Hurley, you think that we don't have that authority? And Mr. Wilbur?
Well, clearly, the executive has the ability to appoint with confirmation from the council.
Why doesn't the council have the ability to appoint?
It's not in the charter.
And
But
that's what we're
our
talking
point.
about.
That's what we're saying. What says we can't?
Yeah, it's silent.
Right.
So can we put it in the charter?
Certainly.
Like the youth advisory commission that we have, right? Did we not come up with it? I mean, I guess the county, yeah, the
It was
county
my
executive.
idea, and my work with Bob to do it.
And then they threw it through the county.
Yeah.
So it came through the county executive's office?
But Laura thinks somewhere there it says we
Yeah,
can't.
I think it's somewhere in the charter that specifically says you cannot do that.
And in the past, we had issues too where the executive wasn't appointing these committees.
Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't an issue.
Meaning the existing committees are like new.
New ones, new appointments.
So
But we gotta remember what we are. We're the legislative body.
That's right.
You know, if he's not doing that for, if it's a legislative issue, that's different, but if it's, other advisory issues, it doesn't.
And Mrs. Ackley, what was the example you just used that you took to Mr. Culver? What board?
The Youth Advisory Council that we
Thanks.
have.
So again, this sort of, from where we looked at it, it's just good governance. If there's a problem like broadband, that should be obvious to the county council and obvious to the county executive, and a creation of a citizen advisory board should be a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Good governance, walk across the hallway, talk to the county executive, because this is a problem facing the community and the county, and we need a fix.
I think sometimes, though, and I agree, that was in a wonderfully utopian world. That's going to work every time. I'm a cynical one, I guess. I just would like to say that, you could possibly go to an executive and say, we want a broadband committee. And the executive's going to say, quit meddling in the executive's affairs. We're handling that. The council doesn't need to take that over. And yet, there could be some times where we need it to follow through with our legislative process, because we have to have information sometimes. And would it hurt to add that? I mean, I don't think how it could
It
hurt.
gets into the question of that line of legislation versus executive. Would it hurt? I don't know, but
I think Mr. McCain's point is the valid one, that if a citizen advisory commission to assist the council with a legislative project, I think that's reasonable. But if it's administrative, I think it should initiate from the executive.
So, the Youth Advisory Committee or a broadband committee, how do you define whether it's executive or legislative?
Like the youth advisory.
So if we're creating legislation on broadband, if we want to create a comprehensive broadband plan or.
That might fall under the council.
Yeah, so then that would fall, if it's something that the council wants advice on with passing legislation.
It's non-binding, it's to perform a task, right? This, whatever group we put together, they don't have any legal authority to make changes to anything with, any fiduciary responsibility or anything like that, right? So,
Just making recommendations.
much like the Charter Review Committee, we're powerless.
So would it hurt to list all of the advisory boards in the charter?
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that.
But it does, another example
Coming up
that
with
was
different
given was
ones
the Animal Ordinance Committee. We spent about an hour and a half trying to figure something out on these animal ordinances.
Right, yes.
And realized it's not going to happen. And we had the foresight to form a committee. I don't know if we did it through the executive or not, but that's a perfect example of needing a committee. So I think the consensus is that we would like to have it in here where the council does have that. And if you want to add for legislative assistance or
Legislative
purposes. And then we've got to go sit down and figure out which one of these 32 are going to cut down to
24.
24. Well, it'll be 32 before we're done tonight. So we're good, right? Okay.
We'll have an A and a B in 508.
Problem solved.
All smart.
Site, I'm okay with that.
So that's 507, 508, 601 through 611, personnel provisions. Michael, we will,
Yeah, the main thing that we thought, and the one that we recommended, is that because the executive is the titular head of government, that personnel, the system should roll and revolve through the office of the county executive as opposed to the county council as it's currently stated. So that's where we were, that any changes to the personnel system would have to be presented by the county executive to the county council, but that right now, we think that it should read, upon the recommendation of the county executive, the county council shall establish a personnel system. Right now, it says the county council shall establish a personnel system. And we, again, just trying to, we're 16 years into this, the county executive form of government, that he or she should be the person to initiate the personnel system. And then, of course, the council does its usual advisory role. So that's where we were.
They're always finding that little thing that didn't get taken care of.
Yeah,
since
no.
it started.
It's a great point.
Kind of amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a great point.
Oh, we didn't think of that.
Yeah,
When
this is a
this
great example of
new
that.
form of government came along,
but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that this was a charter amendment that the council put on the ballot.
I think that's right.
That's right.
Yes.
To acknowledge,
Give us that authority.
I think
we,
that's right.
as I said on many occasions in front of you, and we're grateful for this opportunity, we did make recommendations that ran counter to the changes and recommendations that the county council at some point in time had done. So
Yeah.
full disclosure here.
Yeah. So what would the council like to see done? We're either gonna leave it as it is, where the council has this responsibility. I will tell you, I really wasn't crazy about it when we passed it, I guess it was maybe 4 years ago. Because I'm like, I don't even want to have to deal with personnel issues. I'd rather leave that with the executive branch. But as a body, we agreed, and it was voted on by the public. So what the Charter Review Committee is saying, hey, reverse it, send it back to the executive branch. But that's the decision for,
So what was the conversation, what was the conversation look like whenever you decided to put this, when you all decided to put this on the ballot?
that's a really good
Was
question.
there something that happened? Was there?
Either Joe or Larry, do you help us with that, or? I don't remember how we managed to, Mark may have like created that initiative to, for us to have more control. Mrs. Hurley, you're a historian. Can you help?
It says it right there on your name tag.
The only thing I can recall is that council wanted the authority to make changes to the personnel manual without having to have the county executive's recommendation. And so that's the reason why it was added.
Okay. What's everyone's opinion on this as far as how far we want to take it? Do we want to revert it back to the executive branch? Do we want to leave it under the council's?
I'll just say, I've never been I don't have some burning passion around this, but I've never been a fan. I keep coming back to, we're the legislative body. We're not the human resource department. We have a human resource director and a whole department, and that's definitely a function of the executive side of the government.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I mean, it's under, it's like, that's how it was originally written. Now it's, now we have this authority, but I'd be fine sending it back, because I do think it's an executive, well, it is an executive function. It's not a legislative function.
If I might, when we looked at this, we didn't look at this and go, oh, the county council did this or the county. Our task that you charged us with was to look at this charter and just kind of look at it from a layperson's perspective. We're not you all. We were not involved in the decision to, change the personnel. But it seemed logical to the 15 members of the Charter Review Committee, kind of like what Mr. McCain is saying. Well, that should be a function of the executive, and what Mr. Holloway is saying, that, hey, we did this 16 years ago and we didn't catch everything at the beginning. So it was very logical. My point is, this is not personal. If we recommend flipping it back to a different way, it is in no way a reflection of this council, or is it anything personal. It's just us looking at the function of government and saying, we think maybe it could do better this way.
The way I see it, Mr. Cannon, you mentioned that the citizens voted on it, and if I remember correctly, it was close to 70%.
What you got to remember about charter questions is most of the time they pass.
It may be 70% again.
Most, right, most of
70 is probably low.
70% now to go back.
Yeah.
Right.
It may be.
And normally, that's the thing, that's people,
Unless it's
people
something
vote for them
really,
because they're
unless
there.
it's something that gets really campaigned,
Yeah.
and somebody really goes after it.
Yeah.
Most of the time they check them down.
What we'd like to see.
Well, I don't think we should be in the business of doing that, but I think we should have an oversight. I guess we either do that when we vote on it.
How do you do that?
We'd have to approve it anyway, wouldn't we?
You do, you still have to have council's
Yeah,
confirmation.
Yeah.
It's recommendation from the executive, approval
Right, you would
by
just have to.
legislation.
So we would revert back to that. This
Yeah.
change would revert back to,
That's the charter review language, recommendation from the executive, but it has to be passed legislatively by the council.
everybody all right with that?
So what happens if it's not passed?
The requested change does not go into effect.
So we're good? All right, we're okay with making that change, yes. So that's 601, and with what 601A is what we were addressing, correct? And then there's 601B to clarify the proposed change in employee benefits programs.
Yeah, that, again, they would have to be approved, not just by the county executive. If he or she wished to change the benefits package, it would then have to come in front of the council for approval.
Okay. And then anything else from council in reference to, I believe the council's question went down to 609, prohibition against additional compensation.
Yeah,
And-
I feel pretty strongly about that.
Do you have a consensus, I'm sorry, on 601B?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, a few years ago, we had a situation with the school board,
609B,
609A.
A is fine.
Yeah. We had a situation with a school board where one of the school board members voted to increase compensation in their retirement plan. And there was a lot of upheaval over that when that happened. Ernie
Speaking of the school system,
just had mine. But anyway,
Censor him.
anyway, you know, I don't feel that anybody should be able to sit on the, and everybody should be able to sit on the council. I'm not saying that, okay? But sit on the council and receive pension from the county at the same time. So I would say, you know, if you want to sit on the council, you give up your pension. And I can tell you that that's not going to make anybody want to run for county council. But, you know, there's too many variables here and too many things that go along with what we vote on to have somebody that's receiving pension from Wicomico County to be sitting on the council.
Well, in those instances, can't they just
Should they just recuse
recuse
themselves? Right. If it's
Well,
a conflict
you-
of interest, they do have to
Yeah,
recuse
you
themselves.
can, but I don't, it's too far out there. I mean, you're going to recuse yourself from voting on the budget? I mean, why should you be here if you're going to recuse yourself from everything you're going to vote on? You know, if you're voting on a budget that increases your pension, do you say, well, I'd vote for this, but take my vote out of that part of it? No, I don't think anybody that's receiving a pension from the county should be able to, unless they want to give the pension up. I'm not saying they shouldn't be on the county council, but they should not be receiving a pension and council and be on the council.
A county pension and be on the.
Yeah, county pension, yeah. Not Ernie, I know, yeah, Ernie, yeah, he's state, but anyway, that's, you know, that's kind of like putting the, you know, the fox watching the hen house.
And I kind of see it that way.
If they're already getting a pension.
Or you have to press your mic.
You got the bad one.
Joe stole your other one.
You might as well tell them to turn that one back on, I'm trying to behave myself.
I think you're looking at pretty much like with me as a school bus contractor, because I had to go through Mr. Wilbur for this. And he stated that if, like you're saying, the pension, if they vote on the pension, if it's in the budget, they shouldn't be allowed to vote on it. But with the school board, because we don't vote on the individual budget of the school bus contractors individually, it didn't matter. We just vote on the whole budget of the school board, so it didn't matter. That's why I can vote for the school board or against it, for or against it, because we're not doing if we were doing a block, that it'd be
The
different.
school board handles their own budget.
Yeah, but
Yeah, but we still have to approve it.
We
Submit it to
approve a
them.
certain amount of funding.
Yeah, but the funding for it. So when we vote on it, I'm allowed to vote on it because we're
I
not.
think that's different, though.
No, if we're voting on it, if we were doing it individually, like say the school board, we're voting on the administration part of it, and then if they're doing the school bus, yeah, it'd be different. But being that we vote on the whole budget as a whole, it didn't make no difference.
well, I kind of almost disagree with you on that too, Ernie, but I wasn't going to go after you on it. But, you know, for somebody to be able to sit on the council, and I think it'd be bad, it's bad, it just looks bad for somebody to be on the council that's receiving a pension from the county. I mean, it's almost like double dipping.
I was going to say, is that what you call double dipping?
Pardon me?
So that's public opinion too.
Yeah.
Prosecutor.
Yeah, well, public opinion can play into when the voters go, you know, the voters, you know, but I think there's too many variables there that somebody that's receiving a pension.
Yeah, I don't know.
So if you have a retired deputy who is retired,
Running.
well, that's true too, yeah, right there.
yeah.
If you have a person who's a retired deputy and they want to be on the council could be very beneficial to the overall challenges that we have, whether it's education, roads, or anything, you're gonna say, no, you can't be on here because you're getting a
I
pension?
didn't say that. That's
Right.
not what I'm saying.
Okay, I'm
I'm
listening.
saying they have to make a choice. They're either gonna be on the council or they're gonna give up their pension.
Well, you are saying that. You're saying that they have to forego their pension in order to be on the council.
You
Yeah, I think
can't have the best of both worlds sometimes.
I mean, like no retired teacher could
That's
come,
going
right?
pretty far, yeah.
Or is that state pension?
Pretty gray area.
State, right, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah, I think that gets into, I'm not in favor of going down that path.
If they're here for service, right? This is,
Yeah,
you
if
know,
somebody wants to serve and just because they're retired,
some people
They
could
used to
be
work
here to
for the county,
benefit
now they
themselves
can't.
too.
I don't know, Mr. Wilbur, can you weigh in on this?
I mean, John, you brought it up. I didn't. But anyway, and I like Shane. I've known him since I've known him since he was a kid. But I've had too many deputies tell me in the past, well, we get Shane on there, he's going to look out after us because he's getting, blah blah. I've heard that story too many times in the past month or so.
That hadn't even come to my mind when I mentioned that. I just mentioned the fact that you have someone that gives strong service to this county. And then, if they want to continue in that realm of service to a greater degree, you're gonna penalize them and say, no, you can't do it unless you give up a pension. And as well as I do, from what this job pays, you're not gonna give up a pension for that.
So you have it one way or the other. I mean, we had
I'm just trying to get to the point, I think you're losing good people if you do that.
We had one of our council members several years ago that was a retired county employee. He was a purchasing agent. I can't think of his name now. I heard a lot of grief about that. This was before I was on the council. Why is he on there? I mean, he's getting a county pension.
I think a lot of times it's the exception to the rule, and you have to weigh the good versus the bad, and I think the benefits could outweigh
So-
the negatives.
Paul, is there any law that says you can't derive?
No, I don't think it's illegal to receive a pension from the county and be sitting on
Yeah.
the county council. That's how I react to that.
There's something in the charter that says that you're not supposed to receive
can't be an employee of
compensation from anywhere else in the county that.
being an employee of the state or the county.
Well, section 6 of 9 refers to prohibition against
Or no,
additional
maybe just count.
compensation.
Yeah, that's what we got.
Isn't there something about you can't serve and receive other compensation from the county in the charter?
Well, I think that's 609A that we're looking at
Yeah.
right now. I think that's what you're referring to.
And the council was actually asking for clarification. They said, does this word compensation include pension payments? Can a former county employee serve as a council member if they're receiving pension payments? The council was asking for a clarification on this,
Well, I
not
think
recommending an amendment.
I think that gets ruled out because it says you got to be employed and in the performance of public duties. I mean, if you're retired, not in the performance of the duties anymore. You're retired. So.
Well, is the other part, no officer or employee who is salaried in a fixed,
Right, they're
Or the
not
whole part.
salaried and performing any public duties. They're retired.
right?
So,
Just remind the group that we looked at this and saw your concerns and had this discussion and decided that we thought it was okay as written. Understanding and hearing what you're saying fully, but we also kind of went down that, retired person.
yeah, I'm
We've
fine.
had council members in the past, as you know, who've been retired from the school system and other who have served. So
Yeah.
that was what our thinking was, to just let it alone.
I mean, I lean in that same direction. I mean, John, you can ask for some consensus if there's consensus. I mean, Joe's got a different opinion, but
I think if you look at it,
I'm
even
fine just leaving it alone.
take it one step further from the county perspective, look at it from a state perspective. If you were to say that every representative in the state of Maryland couldn't be a representative if they had any type of a conflict, such as a pension, et cetera, you could possibly lose 10, 15% of your entire representation in Annapolis. That may not be a bad thing.
Isn't it in the charter that a state employee can't serve on the council?
No.
I thought it was at one time.
it currently says a teacher can't serve on the county.
We were asking about that question,
Right,
whether
that's
teachers, yeah, the
County
the
employee can't serve on it.
county employee, and the question
It
whether
said
they
a state
were.
employee or the county employee.
So I guess the question is, are we okay with it as is? Does anyone want to look at making changes as Joe is recommending or asking?
I'm not interested in making any changes.
Josh? Nicole?
No, I'm afraid of the unintended consequences.
Yeah.
Joe?
Lose one over now.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, good
Thanks-
point, though.
Thanks for your input, Joe. So that's 609, correct? And that was, 609 was the last question that the council had in reference to it. And I think that was the last thing that the committee reviewed.
You know, we, in section 700, again, we said, what Lindsay Rader said is what we kind of adopted. And you all know that that's fairly voluminous. And then we made no recommendations on changes to Article 8, Article 9, Article 10, and then we just had a couple of brief changes to Article 11.
Can we go back to 609B?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's the recommendation from the Charter Review Committee to remove other than the county executive.
That's right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
B.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, that was, to me, that was a very worthwhile housekeeping measure, yeah.
That stuck us as why, yeah, so let's,
We're basically saying
got to
we want,
include him or her, too.
we want this county executive to be a working person, not a, yeah.
Yes,
Thank you, Mrs.
that's
Burley.
right, thank you.
Okay, so then we would get back to section 700. Yeah, a lot of this with Lindsay Rader, I don't know, I don't believe anyone on the council is going to try to, I think, sort of have a judgment other than what might be the recommendation of Lindsay Rader. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yeah, I agree.
I try to avoid getting into the minutia of that.
I think I mentioned this previously. I think Lindsay's recommendations, just so we are clear, these budget amendments, CIP amendments, will insert by resolution in here at certain places. So we can get around this legislative bill and do it by resolution. That's the only change I'd make in what Lindsay has drawn up.
Is that okay with it to take, okay, we'll take your advice, Mr. Weber, on that. Council questions in section 700. We had a question on 704, capital program and budget, where it says, does the charter allow the county executive to make changes to the capital program after it's been submitted to the county council, but before it is formally adopted by the council? Letter G indicates the county council shall approve, decrease, or delete any items in the capital program as submitted or amended on or before the third Tuesday in February each year, but it does not specifically say amended by the county executive. That's more of a legal matter, I think, than a matter of practicality as the charter review.
I can recall conversation that the capital improvement plan is a plan, therefore there could be changes to it, but that, you know.
I think Mr. Benson had recommended that changes could be made, but, you know, it would be good to add language about the public hearing date also being able to be changed. So if the county executive wanted to amend the capital improvement program after the public hearing, we would have to have another public hearing date on it, or we would have had to already change the public hearing date that was already set. And they did address that, I believe, in their recommendation.
They
Yeah.
did? Okay.
Yes.
In our recommendation, not as a, yeah, there it is,
It's 707.
707.
Oh, 707, the county.
Because Lark, help me out. I think this happens virtually every year, that there's an adjustment to the capital improvement plan.
It happened probably for like 2 or 3
Yeah.
years, where we just extended the date
That's
of the
right.
adoption of the capital
right.
improvement program to match the adoption of the date of the capital budget,
Yeah.
which is in June.
And the public hearing is often held in like January, February, and I think we were trying to say, hey, if there are changes, there should be an additional public hearing
Right.
to accommodate those changes.
Right, right.
Because those changes often occur in whatever, April, May, well past the public hearing time.
Those are the kind of changes, like if we put that in as a charter amendment, that I just feel like the public's going to really get that.
Right.
You know, and it's like,
Little chance that the public would understand what in the world.
Right.
The change to set, no disrespect to the public, because we're all members of it, but that's a confusing one. What are they saying?
that's what I'm saying,
Change?
right.
Yeah,
right,
that's
right. It's just,
that's a
it's
tough
changing,
one.
you
No
know,
question.
like, why, but yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just, I only say that, is it worth adding as a charter amendment when we're gonna have, or possibly so many, when we're able, seems like we're able to sort of get around this with the moving the deadline and that sort of thing, we're able to
All right, so we
we're
can,
able to get it done.
so we'll be able to muddle through it on our own. All right, so we will not,
I wouldn't say it was high priority.
all right.
That's
What Laura said.
That's where I'm going with it, right, yeah.
So in the section 700, I guess it's mostly reference to Lindsay Rader's recommendations and your suggestions as well, correct, Mr. Wilbur? Okay. Any other questions in section 700 from anybody? Okay.
I was 706, the revenue cap. I really feel like we're going to be in a rough spot for this coming year if inflation has jumped up 7%. If, 706, or 706B is what it is. But does tax revenue cap, notwithstanding other provisions of all revenues derived from taxes in the county? So this specifically does say talks about the county fiscal year, that the county tax roll is the commencement of the shall not increase compared to the previous year by more than 2%, or by the consumer price index of the CPIU by percentage change for the last calendar year determined by the labor statistics, whichever is lesser. So I guess what I'm getting at is we do have a pretty darn big problem on the horizon, and we don't seem to be addressing it. And that is that, obviously, as I've spelled out here, we can only take in, correct me if I'm saying this wrong, we will only take in 2% revenue. And of course, it's hurt us in the past by going with whichever is lesser. This has been a bigger issue for a long time, the revenue cap. So I don't know what we do in this kind of an environment. We've long thought, what happens if we get to that kind of a time where we have this, high inflation, or God forbid, stagflation or other else. But we're now basically there going into that. So, and no one really may want to address this, but this is going to be a big problem because essentially our money's worth 7% less.
I'll address it. So we got high inflation and you want to take more money out of the taxpayers' pockets?
Inflation is your value of your money is worth less.
Our income tax revenues are through the roof, and you want to take more out of the property owners.
Well,
Yeah.
in reality, we're
We
going to
got
have,
$52 million in our reserve budget, and you want to take more money out of the taxpayers' pocket?
we're going to have to pay our bills are going to go up, and our revenue is going to stay down.
Or maybe to Josh's point, from a long-term sustainability standpoint, the math doesn't work.
Doesn't.
Whether it's addressed today.
How long
or tomorrow.
has the revenue cap been in? About, 20 years now?
Right. And Wicomico County is now lost,
2002.
it's over $60 million in revenue. Our budget would be $60 million bigger right now if we never ever touch taxes.
It's basically.
If we left it where it was.
It's basically, I can tell you something, when we went through the recession back in '06 and '07, everything was the revenue cap's fault. And if we hadn't had the revenue cap, probably couldn't afford to live in Wicomico County right now. Because that was the main thing, we just got to get rid of this revenue cap. Well, our budget has probably doubled, more than doubled, since the revenue cap ever came into effect.
But the only way,
Yeah, yeah.
the other challenges that I didn't bring up that I need to mention, obviously, is that We did really well when we had the state chair of the Appropriations Committee who lived in this county. His predecessor followed his lead and enjoyed that philosophy that there is that the state needs to look out for the poorer counties. So that's why we have our disparity grant, which is 9 to 11% of our budget. Is that right, give or take? The current state leadership has brought this up again and again. They were bringing it up a year ago before we had the manna from heaven and federal dollars and before we got into the current. But we are going to down that path. Within the next 4 years, there will be a reckoning that the state of Maryland will then pull back its money, its revenue, its disparity grant money. So what do we do in the situation when we lose the disparity grant? And we have already, of course, hamstring ourselves already. So I don't know if we want to address that now. Probably not the political will, but I'm saying that's a problem. That's a big problem.
Mike, what was the Charter Review Committee's?
Yeah, our formal recommendation there, Mr. Holloway.
And you weren't touching it, right?
No, we recommend appointment of wrong one. Our second bullet point is simply we recommend review of the revenue cap the same way that Talbot County did. That's all. But we did not, as a charter review committee, because we knew this was a political question and we're recommending a review of it. So this is what we were recommending, what you're doing now. But we weren't going anywhere near the revenue cap as a charter review committee.
I have no appetite.
Because it's a politically charged thing, and we thought that was out of the scope of the charter review committee.
I don't have any appetite to go there.
I'm all about it. Let's do it.
I did bring a copy of Talbot County's charter ballot question, so I'll pass that around so everybody.
Is it 3% they're trying to go to? Is that what? And they dropped the penny tax, right?
Well,
last time,
this
they
one was
changed
to allow a temporary increase of the penny.
Right.
And then they also eliminate the consumer price index.
Right. Well, aren't they bringing it back this time?
I haven't heard that.
I think they're bringing, for some reason I thought they were
We did
bringing it
reach
back.
out. We reached out to Talbot County and got how they kind of went down this path, just to put it out
Dropping
there.
the penny tax or something, trying to bring it back.
I mean,
Well, to me, this is going to be for another time. I don't think, this is whole nother work session,
Oh, man.
which we may never have.
which we're never going to have.
Well, you voted in a big raise, you got to put in more time, right?
So I appreciate everyone's concern. Josh, I understand what you're saying. Some people have actually said, which to me is a very valid point, was that the consumer price index that they chose was probably the wrong consumer price index for a fair evaluation. I think, Michael,
There's an
recognized
index
that
that's
before.
tied to government spending as opposed to
Right.
consumer spending, which might align better with, again, the spending of a government.
Sure.
But in the end, it's the consumer spending you need.
At the end of the day,
They're the ones you're representing, not the government.
we officially punted on the question of the
Yeah, I know, I
revenue
was
cap.
there. I was shocked, I like the fell in the floor.
What? And
So let-
welcome.
So we'll say the council doesn't have the appetite to address this. Thank you, Josh. Thank you very much. So we get into section 801. We are now in the section of if time permits. And hang on a second, let me.
See 801, where's y'all done with this stuff?
801 is nothing, it was not part of what the charter review reviewed. They went back to section 1101. Michael, would we want to skip to 1101 just to relieve you of how this
I'm
might
here.
be?
We've been at this for a year, and I can sit here for another half hour. That's
Okay, then why don't we?
trust me. I want to reiterate, and this is a thank you. I know it's premature, but the Charter Review Committee, at the end of the day, what we were hoping as much as anything was that the council would do a thorough review of our recommendations. And there's no one who can say that there has not been a thorough review. So we truly thank you. But I'll sit here as long as you need me to sit here, John. But specifically Article 11, those are just definitions and rules. It's not, again, as Laura said, not a high priority, but we did identify a few changes in definitions there, that's all. And also, because it's 2022, this was discussed by the charter amendment. I made a note to myself that we reference the word he throughout the charter. When it is gender, it is he. But in the definitions, it says he stands as a he or she unless, so, we thought about making a change, and my goodness, that would be about 12,000 references, but we want to acknowledge that we are aware that this charter only uses the word he, but in the definitions section, it kind of says he, for the purposes of this charter, means he or she. Am I saying that kind of correctly, Laura? If you all want to address that, that's completely up to you, but we wanted to at least acknowledge that we had that discussion because it's painfully obvious in 2022 that every reference in here is the word he. So I wanted to make sure that we said that.
And the second section you presented mentioned the fact that, again, a definition of local governing body mentioned the county executive
That's
and the
right.
county council for confirmation. So you're saying that you would like to have this put into the charter?
Yeah, it's a charter recommendation because section 11 may be just definitions and terms, but we felt that it was worthy of comment and recommendation.
Okay, Mr. Wilbur, your position from that, from a legal perspective, it would help clarify
Yep.
the document as a whole?
Yeah, the language that was proposed here, I think if we look at it, I would make a suggestion on that. It says the local governing body. I do think a definition is appropriate to be put in here, or by similar language. And then it says, any action required by the county shall be taken by the county executive and then referred to the county council for confirmation. I think that language would be better stated to say, shall be taken after confirmation by the county council. Because if he takes it and then it's referred for confirmation, I think, the horse is out of the barn at that point.
Say that again?
The language that's in here
Right.
says, any action required by the county shall be taken by the county executive and then referred to the county council for confirmation. I think that it shall be taken by the county executive after confirmation by the county council.
I think that helps clarify
Yeah.
the situation.
So,
It's got to come to you
Yeah.
before the executive acts.
A lot of this was also, I think, having to do with a lot of the grants that come through the county. There's got to be that definition of the governing body.
Or would it
we were coming.
be better to say any action required of the county shall be initiated by the county executive and enacted upon confirmation by the county council? Because I think this is trying to say the county executive can take the initiative, but it has to be
That's another way to express it.
Yeah, because isn't it both?
Yeah.
I mean, by
sometimes
both
we do it
is.
independently.
Like say,
Right, like what we're talking about right now with if someone dies in the line of duty or whatever, that's been initiated here. But most of the things that we do are initiated from over there and brought here.
let's say the common one is, say, a grant from the state.
Right.
A department hears about it, brings it to the executive. The executive sends a recommendation to the council. The council says yay or nay, then the executive can sign to accept the grant.
Is what this is, right?
Well, this seems to isolate it only to the executive taking the initiation, the council confirm, but you have to allow the council the leeway to pass its own legislation independent, correct?
This is, just when it says local governing body, you're just clarifying exactly what that means.
Yes.
So local governing body will always mean the two parties
Yes.
combined?
Right.
Yes.
All right, okay. Well, then you figure that legal jargon out and we'll say okay. And then we have to decide again. I think that's something that probably needs to go on there simply because we're not really acting as a legal body when we have this disconnect.
Well, let's make sure that we're not here to disrupt things. We're simply trying to define for the obligatory grants that come through. We've had a whole bunch of grants that what is the local governing body?
It's
Understood.
agreements and contracts too, it's not
That's
just
right. Not
agreements.
just
Yeah.
grants. Thank you, Laura.
All right, well, Michael, you've been very, very patient with us, and we really appreciate all the work you've put into it.
So thank you on
Yes.
behalf of the committee of 15. We really appreciate it.
And I appreciate that too, but you've taken a lot of time away from your family and from home to be here with us to iron this stuff out. So I really appreciate what you've done for the county and for this council.
Our pleasure.
And in the future, when we appoint committees, if the council gets the authority to do that, we might put some compensation in there.
So,
He did hint.
look, I had a
It was subtle.
milkshake in advance before I got here. All good.
Clarification, Mrs. Hurley, so I kind of lost track. So we did get through the 800s. The 900s and the 1000s and the 11 are the only three we have, or how much do we have left to review as a council?
Yeah, I think we have the 900, because there's a question that was submitted.
All right. I think we want to try to close it out for the evening.
Yeah, that's section 904.
Uh-huh.
You want to start there next?
Okay, so we're going to be looking at, just so I know, the next time the council has to revisit this, it's going to be the 900 section. The 1000 section?
We're scheduled to go until 6:30.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
Okay.
these should be pretty quick, right?
okay.
Aren't these-
Knock it out. Yeah.
If
All
we're
right.
even going to address them.
All right, let's keep
They
going.
didn't, right?
All right. Right, no,
No,
Michael,
we addressed them, to
Yes.
be clear. We addressed
No
everything that.
recommendation.
I didn't make any.
That's correct,
recommendations,
yep.
So,
Yeah, just to be, I will take off my.
right, yeah, they're not real big burning issues.
so one section that the council had a question on, and so it says the county council is responsible for hiring external auditors to review all financial transactions, records, et cetera, and to prepare the county's financial statements. During the auditing process, the auditors report to the county executive, not the council, but the auditors present a summary to the council at the conclusion of the audit. Should this section be expanded to provide the council oversees the actual audits itself?
Why? Aren't we the legislative, I'm back to we're the legislative body, so why are we having to receive the audit? What's wrong? I mean, well, the summary we get's pretty darn detailed that they give us.
When it says the county council is responsible for hiring external auditors, what does that mean? I mean, is that isolated? Because to me, that maybe is what needed to be changed.
That's our job.
Yeah, we hire, I mean, we get to decide which external auditors, whether it's TGM or PKS, what firm would do the audit for the county.
My question is, and I've never questioned it before, but my question is really, why has that been made a council authority as opposed to an executive authority?
Yeah,
Balance
within
of
the
power.
committee, I seem to recall that
Oversight.
For-
if there's an audit that needs to be done because you're hearing there's a problem somewhere out there, that it would be better that get reported back to the council versus the administration first, because they're
Separation
yeah,
of the
separate.
branches.
That raises a good question, remark. How come the county executive office gets an audit before the council does?
Maybe that should be changed.
The question that
Well,
was
that's the
proposed
annual
was,
That's the annual audit, I think. I think we were just talking about
An
if,
independent audit.
if you thought, and
Oh, I understand.
word, you know,
But
landfill comes
we
to
hire
mind. things-
PKS too.
Correct.
And
So,
that was
and
the-
we hire them, why don't we get the information before the executive gets it?
I think that's where that question is
that's what the
coming
question
from.
is.
Yeah.
During the auditing process, they report to the executive. We never hear from them until the end. So this says, should this section be expanded to provide the council more interaction with the audit, I think, is what we're looking
I think
for.
it's fine like it is.
We did two.
Well, anytime
We were-
anytime we have questions from the auditors, I mean, I've called John Stern before. I'm
Ask him. We can ask him all day
answer
long.
them. I mean, there's never any problem there, you know.
So we're hiring them, right? So I mean, that's our,
Yeah.
It's like we hire them, but then the executive deals with it. And this is saying, why all of a sudden are we divulging ourselves of that responsibility and oversight if we're the ones that hired them? Or divesting ourselves, not divulging, divesting.
It's their job. I mean, that's what they do. They're independent auditors.
And I might say
Better for us to do.
they're working, the "we" here is Wicomico County. It's not the council or the
Yeah,
executive.
it's the
why
people.
the audit is for the spending of Wicomico County. So by you do the hiring, et cetera, but, you know, it's for the county.
All right,
And
so,
that's how audits work. Then you
Yeah.
step back and let them do
Yeah,
their.
that's right.
Okay,
due
so
diligence.
we're okay with as is?
I thought we were done.
I know I kind of fudged that
I've
one.
already set my appointment up. You told me we were going to be done.
Any other questions, this may be the easy, any other questions from sections 901 through 907? Any other questions from charter sections 1001 to 1002? Or any other questions from charter section 1101? Or 1201 to 1205?
Did we address the things that I written down, of course, was in here at the end, the censure part, did we address that, or do we want to address that? I don't remember if we actually did.
So,
Left for me to try to conjure up something.
Okay.
yeah,
Come back.
I like
and again, we,
I do think it's a good idea for it to be in the code of conduct.
yeah, through the code of conduct is where the Charter Review Committee thought that, again, we recommend that the council consider making its code of conduct stronger. And so things like censure might go in there as opposed to in a charter change.
Okay.
So should we define the difference between censor and censure?
Censure is an action.
Censor is one doing it.
Unitive. Yeah.
Right. Because people get confused with
I know
those two.
that you don't hear the word censure.
Right.
Yes.
Just for my own clarification, the only thing I wasn't sure if we got into was just did we ever fully address the virtual attendance? Or does that, I think there was some language in the, about attendance here, and that we didn't clarify that. I don't know if we ever did.
Where did you see that? Is that under the council's questions?
Doesn't somewhere say you have to be physically present?
But we couldn't do that, of course, during,
But we made the change based on COVID.
Well, there
we say we made the change,
there
what do you
was
mean?
We didn't change it on paper, but we allowed,
We did a resolution to allow it. It was
Right.
kind of like an exception to the charter provision.
It's 306,
Not something.
action by council.
I'm just thinking in the future, if there's a situation like, I mean, COVID's probably going to come back in a different way. Like, let's say we're exposed in the future and it's a bad variant, and we just have to, you're not sick, you just have to not be around other people. Does a video conference, could that qualify, or do we need to specify that?
or somebody could be sick and we don't want them next to us, so why not Zoom from home?
Yeah, but it'd be nice to be able to spell out. I mean, it's different from, say, like a phone call or a text message in, or listen, like to be able to be in person through a video conference when you are physically unable or should not be. Do we need to spell that out? And
So in 306, sorry to interrupt,
I was trying to get to that.
This is what Laura was mentioning.
it says right here that if you read it, in all of its functions and deliberations, the
Yeah.
county council shall act as a body and shall
There it
have no
is.
power to create standing committees. So it says here again that it
I
doesn't.
knew it was somewhere in there.
Yeah, I just found it going back right
There it
here.
is. Yep.
So you don't currently have the power to create standing committees.
So temporary committees?
I'm just reading,
And what are standing committees?
I don't, what?
oh, so is this probably getting at no?
And
never
standing
mind.
committees are ongoing.
Yeah.
That would be a
Year to
committee
year to
that you,
year
yeah, right,
is the
that's,
idea.
right.
Oh, this is, I apologize.
Like-
This is just saying create standing committees and delegate any of those functions to smaller members. I take it back. I don't think, Laura, this covers what we
This-
were talking about.
Yeah, so if there
My bad.
Pick a piece of
I think that's what I
legislation.
was thinking of.
Right.
though.
Yeah, yeah.
Committee to advise the council about
Advisory.
a legislative issue.
And we can do that.
Right,
Well, it's not explicitly stated.
To quote.
Great.
but I read that.
But that's not a
temporary- If we want to do a
standing
temporary
committee.
advisory.
There's
committee,
nothing
we
that
could
says
that
you
all day
can't
long.
do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
not a standing committee.
All right, so we're in good.
Josh, did you get your question answered?
No, but,
Well, going back to Josh, right, they made a
Yeah.
good point. And
But-
is this the virtual you're talking about now?
yeah, that next line after
So
the
if you're out of town, you zoom in, which, I mean, I did it, I knew a year ago or so, one time.
Right, I let you do it then.
Right, but technically, if we're voting on something with my vote count, because I'm not physically, is that considered physically present?
can we be visually present? Like if we were on as opposed to being physically present. Like, I mean, if let's say we've been around somebody who's got COVID and we're back in the situation again, we just have to be home just because we could have been exposed and we don't know yet,
Or you're ill,
Do we need a doctor's note?
Well, what would we do if we wanted to make it visually? Would we just change that to
Yeah,
visually instead of physically?
we have to put some language
Or
in
say
here.
physically or visually?
Yeah.
But there should be something that's standard so somebody doesn't take advantage of it.
How about this? How about it says something to the effect like visually present, but it has to be, like the council president has to
Approve.
approve it. So in other words, somebody's just not coming to meetings, because they just rather sit home
Just leave it
and,
like it is.
well, the problem is you can't technically according to this, you couldn't be voting if you're not here. You know,
The,
Could be circumstances, where you just simply can't be here for whatever reason, health or something, but you're still able to
We
participate.
did have one council member that joined another board, and they paid more than the council did, so he missed all his day meetings.
Mr. Welber?
I had made a note when the Charter Review Committee was discussing this, they had perhaps put a comma and then unless natural disaster, state of emergency, state declared by the governor,
So there is a clause there that allows for it.
that was
Not
a
yet.
discussion
Yeah.
point at the Charter Review Committee.
Yeah.
Are
It
you
didn't,
quoting the charter now, or are you quoting the
No,
recommendation?
That was a discussion.
I'm just reading from my notes during the Charter Review.
Should that be included?
Means we thought about it, but we
They
didn't.
thought about it, but it elected not to push forward.
I think that's easy, natural disasters, et cetera, but I'm thinking just more from a more practical standpoint, someone's just simply,
Yeah,
well, or they're just out, they're out of town, or like say, or they just had their
Yeah.
hip replaced or something
You could say-
2 days ago, but they can still participate in the meeting, but they can't get here.
you could say physically, comma, or visually, if given extenuating circumstances and approval by the council president.
Council, yeah, that's what I was.
You know, something like that, right?
Can the council president approve himself not being here?
Yeah.
Yes, he's council president.
May
Do we
have
need
to.
do we need a 5 vote to get that?
I think the president would have to defer to the vice president, right? Right? I mean, that usually the process?
Yes, that would be the
Vice
usual,
president would run the meeting in that situation.
yeah.
What were you trying to imply?
But it is 2002 or 22, you should be able to, you do have that ability if you can't be physically present to.
We want to be careful that we don't end up with
A room full of empty chairs.
That's my whole point, that's
Yeah.
why he's got to approve
Right.
it, it's got to be,
Yeah.
that's why the president's got to approve it, it can't just be somebody saying, well, I just don't feel like
well,
coming. So
what happens if he doesn't?
Then he has that ability, then
Yeah.
they.
Then they're
they're-
absent.
Right.
You vote for a different president next year. Yeah.
It's,
But yeah, their vote doesn't count.
it would be like setting the agenda. The
Right.
president sets the agenda. The president determines.
Does that warrant
Joe
a
has a
charter
point.
Mixed
change?
feelings on that.
Huh?
I got mixed
Well,
feelings.
the
on
charter
that, 'cause I don't
says
want anybody to take
must
advantage
be
of it.
physically present.
What about if we did a resolution that gives a definition to what physically present means? Can that be done via a resolution instead of a charter change?
Yeah.
It says,
Physically
You know,
present,
like-
physically
yeah.
present
Like
is
you come to
physically
speak.
present.
Right.
Now you can-
I feel like it's really hard. I'd rather us like address it and say,
Would you look at making that as a change for visually, what was recommended by Josh earlier, that it has to be authorized and?
but with extenuating circumstances
Yeah.
or something, we could use basic language like that.
But should you put a limit on how many can be absent or?
Larry Dodd cannot do this more than 3 times a year.
well, I think that's, once again.
No, I meant per meeting. Like,
But I think that's
Yeah,
where
yeah.
the council president comes into play then, if somebody's doing this, okay, now they've done it 3 times in 6 months. Council president, might be able to say, no, this is, puts his big boy pants on and
We censure them.
sends
I like that word. Okay, so, Mr. Webb, if you don't mind, because we will be revisiting this because
Yeah.
we're going to have to do a cut-down list.
But we should create the option, and nothing.
What I'm thinking is.
Thank you, I gotta go.
Yes, sir, Joe. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
See you, Joe.
The changes, say underlined changes. Here's the whole charter.
See you, Joe.
The
Thanks.
underlined changes that you have discussed, and then do you
Add
want
that.
in or out as ballot question?
Right,
End of the
right.
day.
Yeah, that's going to be the hard part. That's going to be the hard part.
And
Shrink this down.
Yes, Mrs. Rowley.
I do have the list, the summary list of things that you've already agreed upon, whether you've agreed to take a look at it again, or whether or not you've agreed to the Charter Review Committee's recommendation.
Okay.
So I'll pass this around so you guys have an idea of what you need to do next.
Would you want to email that to us so we have it?
You want to update it, then send it to us? 'Cause we
I can
just-
update it from tonight. Yeah, I can do that. You want
Yeah,
to
once
put
you
it
do,
back
we'll have
then?
one.
Okay.
And a copy, you'll of course copy Mr. Wilbur and Mike and Mr.
I'll
Dunn,
work
right?
with Laura to make sure that my notes and her notes.
And copy Mike too, just copy Mike,
Back.
just keep him in the loop.
Yep, we're here for the long haul.
Any other questions, subject matter? No. At this time, we open the floor for public comments. Are there any public comments?
Yeah, I'd like to go to the podium if I may.
State your name.
Seeing none. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
moved.
Second.
Second.
Means adjourned.